The first setting we'll be taking a look at is Hide Eye Candy. Hide Eye Candy will remove all the smaller animals, fireflies and anything similar from the game. It will also disable the minor effects in the game, like the wind blowing through the grass. If you first take a look at the performance difference, you can see between having this enabled and disabled, we lose around 8% of our performance. So to enable all the different animals, the fireflies, the effect in the grass, we're losing 8% of our performance. Going back to the quality and looking at the quality difference, you can see that this setting doesn't make that big of a difference, as it's only some smaller effects and smaller animals that's actually affected by the setting. Therefore, this is more of a nice to have than a need to have. And if you need some extra performance, I would highly recommend to leave this enabled, which means that you disable all the different creatures and the effects. The next setting we'll be taking a look at is character quality. Character quality affects the quality of all the different characters inside the game. So this will be your own character, your teammates, the enemies, the shopkeeper, the different jungle champions and so on. This means that as you turn it down, the quality and also the resolution of your character or all the different characters in the game is also going to be turned down. If we firstly take a look at the performance difference, this is kind of weird image we're getting right here. As you can see, I actually am gaining FPS from going from very low to very high somehow. I think what is happening is more or less that since this game is not that very hard to run for the most part, my GPU has a lot of headroom, and therefore this means that my GPU can better utilize its resources, and therefore I actually slightly gain some FPS. Therefore the FPS and the different performance actually doesn't tell us that much. Looking back at the actual quality of the different options, you can though see that there is a fairly large difference between very low and all the way up to very high. However, it seems like between high and very high there is a very small difference, if any difference at all, between the quality of these two. And at high you have a very sharp and good looking character, and therefore I would recommend to use the high option. Now let's take a look at environment quality. Environment quality controls the quality and the resolution of the textures in the environment in the game. So as you can quickly see here, between very low and low we have a clear difference in quality, where low looks a lot better than very low. We even get some extra different textures in the environment, so we get, for an example, some extra flowers on the ground. If you firstly take a look at the performance difference between these 5 options, we can clearly see that there's a big difference going from very low and all the way up to very high, where we lose around 13% of our performance, which is quite a lot of performance that we're losing. Another thing to note is that this will also impact your VRAM usage, as this is impacting the amount and the resolution of the textures that you are using while playing the game. And therefore, if you look at the second slide here, you can see that between very low and all the way up to high and very high, we use around 6% extra of our VRAM. So that is also something to look out for if you don't have that much VRAM in your system. Going back to the quality difference between these 5 options, like I said earlier, we can clearly see a difference between very low and low. However, going between low to medium, I don't see any difference at all. Between medium and high, we do get some slightly extra sharper textures, but they are also fairly difficult to see. And between high and very high, I don't see any difference at all. Therefore, if you can stomach the FPS loss and the extra VRAM usage, I would recommend to use the high option, as this seems to be the best option to use, where you also get a lot of good quality. However, if you don't have that powerful of a PC, I would recommend to at least use the low option. Low only uses around 3 to 4% extra performance and only 2% extra of your VRAM. Now let's take a look at effects quality. Effects quality controls the quality of the different lighting effects inside the game. So this means it controls the quality and the lighting coming from the different inhibitors, the towers, and the different braziers with fire lit around the bases. If you first take a look at the performance difference, you can see there's not that big of a performance difference going from very low and all the way up to very high, where we only lose around 3 to 4% of our performance. However, it's also important here to look at the VRAM usage, as the VRAM usage actually increases by quite a lot. So you can see here in my graph that between very low and low, there's no increase in our VRAM usage, but between low and medium, it increases with around 10%. And this stays stable between medium and up to very high. Therefore, the best setting fitting you will depend a lot more on the amount of VRAM you have compared to the actual performance that you're losing. If we try to take a look at my first example in terms of the quality difference, here you can see there's a clear difference between especially very low and low, where while we have it on very low, the inhibitor is not lit up at all and we only have a small fire in the brazier. Going up to low, it starts to get more vibrant and starts to actually be light up, as well as the brazier also starts to have more fire, and this continuously gets better as we go all the way up to very high. Looking at my second example here, you can see the same thing also happens with the towers, except for the towers we actually need to go higher up in setting before it actually starts to be lit up. So you can see it's not until we actually hit the medium option that the tower is actually starting to be light up in that blue color, and not until we hit very high where it's actually really bright and beautiful to look at. And the same also goes for the brazier, where you can see there's not that much fire in it when we are at very low and low, and it gets a lot more when we hit that medium sweet spot. For my recommendation, if you have the VRAM, I would recommend to set this to very high, because the performance difference seems to be more or less the same across the different settings, where you lose around 3 to 4% of your performance. And the VRAM usage, as long as you use medium or higher, is exactly the same. So therefore, you might as well go all the way up and use the very high option and get the best lighting in the game. Next up, we got shadow quality. Shadow quality controls the quality of the different shadows inside the game, where the lowest option is that you turn them all off, and all the way up to the very high option where they're very crisp and very pronounced. If we firstly take a look at the performance difference, we can see that going from having turned the shadows off and to low, we lose around 5% of our performance. Going from low to medium, high or very high has the exact same performance difference, and therefore medium and high doesn't make any sense to use, since you might as well go up to very high. All of these three make you lose around 8 to 9% of your performance. So it's also quite a performance loss that you're taking from using one of these settings. Going back and looking at the quality difference, we can clearly see the quality difference between having this turned off and having it turned to low. After low and up towards very high, the shadows get slightly more pronounced and they get a higher resolution in them, so they get sharper to look at. For my recommendation for this setting, I would recommend that if you have a lower end system or a need of more FPS, that you would use the low option, as this only takes around 5% of your performance and makes the game look a lot better, because shadows actually make a big difference in the perceived quality of a game. However, if you do have a lot more performance that you can spare, then I would recommend going up to very high, as medium and high doesn't make any sense, since very high, medium and high all have the same performance loss. And lastly, let's take a look at anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing smooths out jagged edges inside the game to give it a more clear and crisp image to look at. If we first take a look at 1080p and take a look at the performance numbers for 1080p, you could see that I actually didn't find any performance difference at all between having anti-aliasing turned off or having it turned on. And if we look over into the quality, I actually couldn't find any difference either. So it all makes sense that there's no performance difference, because it seems to do absolutely nothing. I couldn't find any quality difference at all, no matter how hard I tried to look for it. And therefore I would simply recommend to leave anti-aliasing off. If we then take a look at anti-aliasing in 1440p and take a look at the performance numbers, here we do actually get some performance difference, where we see an up to 5% performance loss from having this turned off up to having it turned on. However, once again, when we're looking at the quality difference, there isn't none. I can't find any quality difference between having it off or having it on. And therefore, once again, I would simply recommend to leave it off. And if we lastly take a look at 4K and start with the performance numbers once again, the story is actually the same as with 1080p. There's not that much of a difference in terms of performance. And as with 1080p, 1440p, there's no quality difference either. I couldn't find any place where this made any quality difference. So therefore, it seems like anti-aliasing isn't doing anything in this game, no matter what resolution you're playing at. And therefore, no matter what resolution you're playing at, I would just recommend to leave it completely off. And lastly, here are my own custom settings, which are based off the recommendations I made throughout the video. Thank you all for watching. If you made it this far and been able to use this video to get better FPS in League of Legends, please like and subscribe for future videos where we'll take a look at other games. If you have any feedback on the videos or any other tips or tricks to get more FPS in League of Legends, please share them in the comments below. If you're interested in these kinds of videos, maybe check out the video I made on Dota 2. Have a nice day. Bye bye.